The first item is the consent agenda. Has everybody had a chance to review that?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussions or updates needed on that? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, so it's approved. I just did see a message come in. Okay, I don't know how we do a sign-in for people who might want to speak. I don't know if there's anybody who wants to speak.
I just saw a chat message come up. JR and Kim both want to speak during visitors' comments, and Stephanie's saying the same thing.
Okay. So if you want to call them in, because I can't, for some reason, I'm seeing chats, but I'm not, maybe it's something I'm doing wrong, but if you just want to call the visitors in, that would be great.
Okay, Stephanie,
Yep.
go ahead.
Okay. All right. Just give me 1 second. I tried to kind of write this out. So I really was just wanting to talk about the virtual learning. I got the update last Friday. I just wanted to express that, East Meadow has awesome technology, and I'm just unsure why we're not using it more. I emailed administration asking the same thing, and I was under the impression that DESE stated new material could only be introduced by teacher video conferencing or pre-recorded lessons. And since we're not doing that, I'm just wondering if we are continuing to just do maintenance for grades K through 6 from March to the end of the school year. My kindergartner has weekly Zoom meetings, voice calls, and messages with her teacher, while my third grader has barely spoken to 2 out of her 3 teachers. One of her teachers told me that they were told at a staff meeting last week that kindergarten was given the okay due to their parents being the ones logging them in and out and safety concerns. Like I said, I reached out asking what that was about, and Mr. Latoy had said that they are monitoring sites, and if one opens that is safe and secure for students in elementary, they'll pass that along. To be honest, I wasn't sure what that meant, because many other districts nearby, elementary levels, are utilizing voice virtual learning in videos. I spoke to some teachers. Ludlow, for example, has a first grade teacher. They're doing daily Zoom for half an hour. 6th grade's doing 2 a day. Belchertown, grades 3, 4, 5, Google Meets twice a week for an hour. Westfield's doing 2nd grade, 1 to 2 Google Hangouts per week. Chicopee, 4th grade, is doing daily Google Meets for an hour. South Hadley's doing pre-recorded lessons and weekly Google Meets. I mean, the list is just so on. I'm just wondering why we are not doing that yet 6 weeks in, and if we're going to continue to not do that, was my impression from Mr. Latoy, and I'm a little concerned about that. So that was my big question. I think that was it.
Okay. So, Mike, do you want me to just call the next one, or do you want any discussion?
I think to be honest with you, I think we can. I don't know if Cheryl wants to try to answer that now or what. I know.
Well, I'd just like to remind everyone that public comment isn't a discussion. It is for people to share their thoughts and concerns. We will be addressing some of the upcoming changes during the remote learning section. And I will get into a little bit of the detail there. I won't get into all of what Stephanie was discussing. Certainly, we'll get into a good part of it.
Okay. All right. JR? You guys are on mute.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, can you unmute me, please? Hi, good evening. Hope everybody's doing okay and everybody's healthy, family. I just had, I missed the last meeting, and I just had just 2 questions. One, especially now that the school year is over this year, in this pilot program, I wasn't really aware of this. Like I said, I missed the meeting a couple weeks ago. And the first question I guess I have is, is this pilot program done anywhere else in the state that has any feedback on this program? is it approved by DESE, and is it approved by the state to split up a sixth grade like this to, put one in a high school and one in, a different East Meadow? And I guess lastly, seeing is that, this year has been obviously considerably shorter now because of, this pandemic. We're really now moving fifth graders into a high school. Without the sixth grade, completing, I think kids are really young now, even more than before, without, going through an entire, fifth grade learning, structured learning in school. So I just, like I said, those were just kind of my two questions about, has this been done before? And is it approved to be done? Doesn't DESE have the ultimate say on whether you can do this or not? And, your thoughts on, I guess, them being really young and missing out this last, however long, 5 months of school to mature, because of what's going on. Thanks.
Okay, Kim?
I wasn't talking. I was just writing that JR wanted to talk.
Oh, sorry. I misunderstood your chat.
No worries. It's fine.
I just feel I know we don't normally do this, but we don't have a traditional sign-in, so I just want to give a minute if there's somebody else that wants to speak, kind of speak now or forever hold your peace kind of thing. I know that people were having trouble last time, and I heard from people that they felt like they didn't get a chance. And I'm on an iPad this time, so I don't know where to go and see the chat thread, but I'm seeing them as they pop up, so I think we're probably good. So kind of going once, going twice. Is everyone cool if we move on to the next item on the agenda then? All right.
All right, so thank you, Jen.
Mike, you're up.
Yeah, so thank you, and and that's the reason I had asked you to do it, because I was kind of afraid to touch anything and then be booted out. So, the next item is Marcus, and I see Marcus is available tonight, and he's with us. So
First time we probably got invited.
Yeah.
go ahead, Marcus. It's all yours.
Well, hello. I'm just here to stop by and see how everyone's doing since I haven't been here for a couple times. Everyone doing all right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's
How
good to see
you?
Marcus.
I'm good. How are you?
I don't know. I was wondering how you were feeling. I know how Eva's doing after this, today's announcement.
I'm fine. I was expecting it.
That was a really, really high-powered, high enthusiasm. Fine. I'm fine.
I'm fine.
So you really can't meet with the rest of the student groups, can you? It's kind of hard for you to give us a lot of updates at this point.
Yeah. I keep in contact with the people I'm closest with, but that's about it.
Will you guys be able to meet? Student council?
There's been a couple communications on our Google Classroom for our grade and for our student council, but not too much.
It would be interesting, actually, not only for from a technology perspective to see how it is working for you guys, but in times like this, probably what you're thinking and what you're feeling will be a lot more important to share.
Mhm.
So if we can create that opportunity, it would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree, especially with regards to I like the classes themselves,
Mhm.
and what you're learning. Is it enough? Is it too much? I mean, some of these things we hear, we do hear from different people, but it's nice to get that other perspective too.
Okay. Yeah, I could reach out to our student council to see if people would want to put together a survey of some sort, or just reach out to their individual classes, because I know that the seniors and the freshmen have their own, and the sophomores all have their own different individual classrooms that they could probably reach out on and get some opinions.
Yeah, okay, that would be great.
Yeah.
And we'll get you at the next meeting too. I guess
Yes,
we're-
probably. I don't
Okay.
see why not. I don't have anywhere to go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus.
Is there anything else for Marcus?
Nope.
All right. Moving on to the new business, the digital literacy grant.
Yep. So we were awarded the digital literacy grant for middle school grades 6 through 8. It's fund code 152. The amount is for $10,390. The goal is to establish and promote rigorous, engaging, and standards-aligned digital literacy and computer science education in public schools. The expectation is that we participate in a facilitated process to develop a digital literacy and computer science implementation plan for the district, and that we select a digital literacy and computer science curriculum for the school year 2021, that we complete educator and coach curriculum professional development for delivery in the school year 2021. It includes 3 to 4 contact days in the summer for professional development, and with the changes, that's going to be a little challenging. So we'll have to, we're in contact right now with the DESE to figure out how that's going to go. Right now, we are slated to have 6 teachers participate, and that's the majority of the funding for professional development and curriculum development, but there is also funding for supplies for implementation. So I did want to celebrate that with the committee, and I also wanted to give credit to Beth Craven, who worked on Granby being able to participate in that grant opportunity. And that's all for that.
Thank you, Cheryl. That's great news.
Is there any way you can, and I don't know if
I
you've
know.
done this already, but you get that up on, so can you put that up on the webpage? Is there like like you can put a little snapshot of a success?
Yep.
And a little bit of what
Sure.
it means and what we have to do with it?
Yeah, it's good news, right? In all of this
Yeah.
other news.
Yep. All right, was there anything else for Cheryl on this? Okay, we'll move on to the bid results for the busing.
Yep, so I put the bid results in the folder last week. The bid was opened on April 15th. We had a few technical difficulties trying to do that over Zoom. So what ended up happening is Andy Paquette, who's currently working in Ware, opened sent out the recording of opening the bids and sent us all the information. So I just wanted to kind of give you guys a little insight on as to how that went down. There was only 2 proposals, one from McCarthy Transportation and one from First Student. And First Student came in as the lowest of the 2 bids. So I would just like to recommend First Student for their transportation services starting in July, the fiscal year 21, July 1st of 2020.
Now, does that require a vote? I'm a little unsure how this works, especially with the 3 towns.
Yeah, so I reached out to Mark and Andy. I haven't heard back from them yet. I would say, I'm not sure. I don't know. I would say to be safe, we would vote them, and then I will bring that recommendation to Andy and also Mark Chapulis, and then we'll have one common either response to First Student or however that goes. But I would say let's vote on First Student, and then I will bring that to Andy and Mark.
So the agenda doesn't specify there's a vote. Does that mean we can't vote tonight or not? I guess is my question.
I'm not sure. I know we have in the past been specific on things that needed votes or not, but I'm not sure. Cheryl, I'm not sure if you know that.
I think you could vote, given they need that information to move forward with the process.
I just want to make sure we were all set. That's all.
Yep.
All right. So can I get a motion?
And Mike, it may also need your signature when everything is done.
Yeah,
I
certainly
wonder-
will. Yep.
Well, that's what I thought, and then I thought we had to vote because it was something that
Mm-hmm.
did a signature, but
Yep.
Okay.
Cool.
So can I get a motion?
I'll make a
So moved.
motion. I'll second it. Jim, you're on
Okay.
mute.
All right, so all those in favor?
Hold
Aye.
on. No, I have questions.
Oh,
Ashton.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Emery. I'm sorry.
No worries. Adam, thank you for doing this.
Yep.
Can you just help us understand the differences between the last bid that we had, which is our current figures basically, and this one?
So total, and first I should point out on First Student, I'm not sure if you guys did have a chance to look at it. There was a, I don't want to call it a mistake, but the total amount of their contract at the bottom did not add up to the actual totals of parts 1, 2, and 3. But that's a minor change, so that's okay as far as bid specs go. We can just let them know that it's assumed. We just do the math on our own and update the document. So if anybody caught that, I had caught that when Andy sent them to me. I made him aware there's nothing that we needed to do to change anything. So that's one thing. Emery, your question again, sorry, just the difference of the cost for this year compared to
the previous bid?
Yep.
And I was going to ask the same question, but hopefully, we may be able to amend and maybe mention the numbers as opposed to voting on something that may be reflecting the wrong numbers.
Yeah, that would certainly be up to you guys if you want to vote it that way. That would be, I guess, up for your guys' discussion.
Yeah, I would suggest that we vote for the correct numbers as opposed to just a document.
Okay. I'm not sure. I made corrections on my end. Just give me 1 second. I'm not sure if I put the corrected version into the folder. No, I did not put the corrected version in. So I can give you, if everyone is looking at the First Student cost breakout.
Yep.
You'll see at the bottom where it says total annual contract costs, it says $95,225. What they did was just add up the part 3 of that when it should be the total. So what I'll do right now is let me just get the 40, 20.
Based on the letters that they put in there, it is correct, but it's not for the total year entire
yes.
thing. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So the total amount, and I'm not sure if anyone also added it up to double check me, but the total amount would be $641,060.20. So what that includes, again, if you're looking at it, is the cost for regular transportation, the cost for late buses, and the cost for athletic buses, field trips, and summer trips. So all of that would total $641,60.20. I'm not sure, again, if anybody did the math. I'll do it again just to make sure.
I did the math quickly because it looked different, but I didn't.
So as Mike is doing that, do you mind if I ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
So looks like the assumptions for, and I understand that these are probably pretty boilerplate and they're applying some of the assumptions to everyone. But for Belchertown and Granby, looks like the same athletic assumptions are applied. Was there a reason for that? Was that part of what we agreed to as we were going into this collective bid, or was it something that they gave to us?
So you're saying that the numbers for, let me just so I understand it, the numbers for athletics or field trips for us is the same number as Belchertown?
The unit cost, yes.
Yeah. So what I'm going to assume, it's a pretty good assumption, but when they calculate the mileage for athletic trips, it's from their Belchertown garage. So I'm assuming, and I'm assuming that we play, and if Allie's on here, she can jump in. We play all the same teams and have a similar schedule. So the mileage from Belchertown to whoever sports they're playing is essentially the same for us because of the way they calculate at least the mileage for athletic trips, because it's done from like I said, their Belchertown garage. So how they do it for athletics is the mileage from the Belchertown garage to Granby, to where we're going, back to Granby, back to the Belchertown garage is how they calculate mileage for athletic trips.
Okay.
So it would make sense that those numbers would be relatively, the same, but I can look into that for you.
Okay.
Adam, another question, is 100 trips, is that like a minimum or something? Is that that's what's expected? How do they know it's going to be 100 trips?
I would say between sports and field trips, it would be about 100 trips. Again, I can look to see if that's specific in the contract or in the bid specs.
Is that like a minimum? Is that,
Yep.
Just curious. I didn't look at, do they do the same thing for Belchertown and Ware?
Well, would that number of 100 trips be what our norm is? Is that where, I mean, it's not like they just pulled it out of, is that what you're saying, Adam, is you'd look and see if it was in the past?
Yeah. I'm assuming it's just a standard, it's a standard amount of trips between athletics, field trips, and summer trips, but I will get that and I'll send it to you guys in an email.
Well, because Ware had 140 trips.
Yeah. So again, it's based on information that's given to them, and again, I will get the details of that and forward it along to you guys.
Okay.
And it's a round trip, not a one-way trip?
Round trips. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Emery, you had another question?
Yeah. Do they make the assumption also? Well, these are typically based on assumptions. That's why I was asking. If there was an agreement that the assumptions were fine, that's exactly what they do. Because it's difficult sometimes to say, tell me how many games you're going to go to, how many field trips you're going to go to before they are even scheduled, and then, come to those numbers. So there's, some give and take. That's understood, I guess. But I'm just trying to understand the assumptions and whether or not these are things that we agreed to as we were getting into that collective bid. Per trip, there is a average driver waiting time of 3 hours. Is that what it was? It's not explicit here, but if you take 300 and divide it by 100, so that's 3 hour waiting for drivers. Was that the underlying assumption?
Yeah. So there is waiting time in there, and that's again, if you're going to I'm going to use a baseball game for an example. I would say probably a 7 to 9 inning games. I'm not sure what they play now, is probably between 2.5, 3 hours of the bus driver sitting there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess they made all an assumption. The first question that I was asking about looks like this is higher than what we had in our previous contract.
Yes, it is. And the per diem rate, let me just make sure I'm looking at the right. Yep. So the cost per bus per day went up to, you can see on this one, it's $420. I believe the last contract was $368 a day. And I can also get those figures for you guys. And again, I'll do I don't want to say a full analysis, but comparison on this once we know that it's obviously it's for student, but I know there that rate certainly went up from last year quite a bit.
Yeah, so last year. Okay. So
do you have last year in front of you? I want to say off the top of my head, Emery, just from looking at it over the last few weeks, it's $368 cost per bus per day for regular transportation.
Yeah, that I don't remember.
Okay.
But what I'm looking at, and maybe I'm just making the wrong assumption here. I'm looking at your presentation for FY21. I had the impression that you had used the existing budget for transportation in that version. Is that correct?
So I built in a % increase in that projection, just knowing we were kind of in limbo with finishing out the current contract and going into the next contract.
Okay.
And I believe I used a 5% increase on that number.
So we have 500,000 for regular and about a little more than 50,000 for athletic, which is still short. is that an issue for our budget perspective, or was it?
Well, that's a separate town article, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't essentially affect us. That's a separate town article, and that money comes from the town.
Well, it affects the total number that you are showing on that presentation. So yes, it
Yeah,
is a
okay,
separate
so
article,
yes.
but doesn't mean that
Okay,
it's
yes.
not. Yeah.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. Yes,
Yep.
it would have effects on those numbers, but it doesn't. Whatever way the transportation number fluctuates, it doesn't have any impact on our actual budget. But on the numbers in that presentation, it will. Yes.
Yeah. I guess let me ask it a different way. Since you just mentioned that you had worked in a 5% increase, the fact that the regular transportation now is about $29,000 more than that, and the athletic is about $15,000 more than that, is it really, is that within the ballpark, even beyond the 5% increase that you had incorporated in your budget?
I can get.
So it's 30
Yep.
plus. It's $45,000 difference between what we have in the budget and what's showing here. Not that I guess a bid is a bid. That's understood. But I'm just trying to understand their side of it. Whether there was any explanation why the increase was somewhat substantial.
So there's not, and I'll kind of give you kind of what we've been dealing with throughout the whole current situation that we're in for this year. Is it's been difficult to get the cost breakdown from First Student as to what each of their rental facilities, fuel, driver pay, all of those costs broken out. It's been difficult to get them for the current year. We don't ask for it broken out that way in when we put the bid specs out there. We're still awaiting some of that information from First Student for the current fiscal year, and I can back into some of those numbers for the new contract once we get them. But it's been difficult, to say the least, to obtain some of that information from them. We don't ask for it in such a granular way in the bid proposal. Like, we don't ask for how does that $420 per day rate, how do you come up with that? Fuel's in there, driver cost is in there, a bunch of things are in there. We don't ask for that type of information.
Yeah, thank you for that. Let me just put it out a little differently, and I'm just gonna pass on that one. So the fact that you already had worked in a reasonable increase into your budget, and that these numbers are different, it make me question whether or not the current situation that we're in had any impact on these numbers. In other words, that if they are not sure that they're going to be covered for a certain cost in current circumstances because they're not really functioning because there's a transportation, was it potentially worked into these numbers in the upcoming contract? Maybe a cynical view, but I just wanted to really throw it out there because the difference is fairly substantial compared to what we had seen last time.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And actually, we've, between myself, Mark, and Andy have actually talked about that. Like, they may have some leverage in the current situation because we had the bid out. We were in this current circumstance. And like you said, they may they may inflate some of those costs to kind of cover them if something like this ever happened again. We don't know those answers. I don't think we're at the point to ask those questions yet. But it's certainly something that we figured played in such an increase into the cost of per day of buses.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. So I think you wanted to vote based on the actual total number, correct? You wanted to amend the vote so it reflected the actual number?
That is correct.
And I agree with that when I did my own calculation. So what he's got written on that separate sheet is the same number I got.
The 641 060 20?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
The one thing I wanted to ask, part 3, does anybody do a true up to that at the end of the year?
Yeah. So again, we will certainly do a true up at the end of the year because again, if athletic games get canceled or certainly to part 3 there is some some reconciliation that goes on through for all parts of this.
Yeah, I just figured that if if we had 105 games, I bet that they would be at us for those 5 extra games that weren't
Certainly.
factored in, right? So I just wanted to make sure
Mhm.
that we had the ability to do the same on our end.
Adam, unless I missed it, what happens in years 2 and 3 of the contract?
So it's essentially the 3-year contract is for the same amount.
Same amount?
Each year. The only thing that changes the amount of the contract is the fuel escalator that's in there, and it could be a credit back to us, or it could be us owing first student more money. And there's a whole breakout on how they calculate that. So that would be the only fluctuation in cost throughout the 3 years.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, any further questions, comments?
Just real quick. So just to be clear, so this year's, or this current fiscal year, so this school year that we're in right now, the cost per bus per day was $361.68 compared to $420 and change in the current proposal.
Yeah, it's pretty
Answer.
substantial.
Yep. Mhm.
Yeah, and we honestly, on top of that, we don't know what at least the upcoming semester will look like. We don't know what the oil prices will look like, and even the extra cushion that they put there may become even more substantial, more dramatic if the fuel prices don't go back up. Whatever estimates they have don't hold. But I guess this is the thing about our collective bid. There are assumptions, and we agree and understand, and based on that, these are the numbers.
So,
do we know whether the other districts voted on this yet?
We don't. I believe they're all. The other two have. I believe us and Belchertown are on the same schedule for school committees. I don't know about where. So if it's not tonight like we are, it'd be next week, and then. But I'll follow up with Mark and Andy. Again, we're still talking at the state level about the current year and how we're reimbursing our transportation vendor. So we talk on a weekly basis. So I will follow up with them.
I'm also a little concerned, and I mean, it's not really anything we're going to do with this contract because this is what it is, but we don't really know what school looks like next year, especially in the fall, right? And
How
what this
scary
may
is
mean-
that?
Yeah, and what this may mean to this contract at some point, on some level. But this is the best information we have right now, right?
Again, we were in a very interesting situation coming off, being in our last year of the contract, in the situation that we're in, and having a bid out for a new contract. So it was certainly an interesting situation that we were in. And these numbers, obviously, they're not set in stone. It gives us an idea, budgetary wise, as to what to expect. But there's so many unanswered questions with school even starting next year. I think just for now, it's more of a guidance than anything else.
So when did we, remind me, I'm sorry, I forgot, but when did the bid go out, like the request for bid go out? Was the COVID-19 thing just starting at that point? Because I know
so the bid, all of it went out in the beginning of March. The actual opening was scheduled for April 1st, but due to that was pretty much the heightened period of all this, and we weren't sure how to open it, how to have a virtual bid opening, so that we pushed it back to the 15th. So it did go out. Right? Yeah, so it did. The bid went out in a pretty a pretty tense time for at least our district. We were at the height, I think, of this situation. So
it's just unfortunate that, I mean, we had to do something. I mean, the bid was going to have to go out regardless, and I mean, we had to wait till today to get the call on the rest of the school year from the governor. So these things are just, I guess, what they are, right?
Again, yeah, it's just I don't want to say bad timing, just just bad timing for this, in this particular case. Yes.
Yeah.
And I just put it in the tonight's shared folder for school committee. I put in the whole bid packet that went out. I want to say, yeah, it's 164 pages. So it covers all 3 towns, but you can see all of the information that was requested in that bid solicitation.
All right.
It looks like they went up by 11% or so compared to the last bid per year.
Yeah, 'cause I
My
quick look,
rough calculation.
yeah, so the athletics field trips amount, I think the athletic amount stayed relatively the same. I believe it was 46,000 this current year, and I think year 1 of the new contract is also 46,000, if I remember correctly.
We're only seeing a total number. We're not seeing year 1, year 2, do we?
Well, it's all the same number. It's all the same
Right.
amounts for each 3 years.
Right. So I'm not sure. So when you say year 1, is it supposed to be different year 2?
No.
Okay.
No.
Comparatively.
Okay.
All right, so I think we need an amendment. And while we're coming up with that, does anybody else have anything they want to say about this? Are we ready to vote?
Ready?
All right, so can somebody make an amendment?
Then was it your motion?
It was. So
Yeah.
what do I say? Just say that to the amended dollar amount, which I don't remember what it is. I can write it down.
So the dollar amount is $641,060.20.
So just say, I'd like to amend the motion to include the correct amount of $641,060.20. Is that okay? Okay.
Absolutely, and I'll second that one.
Okay, all those for?
Aye.
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 Now, all those against? All right, looks like the ayes have it.
I find I get really punchy during these Zoom meetings.
That's why I keep it on mute. So then the next item, I guess we're into old business now. Remote
Yes.
learning plan.
All right, so just today we received news that the governor has closed our school buildings for the remainder of the school year. So we will engage in remote learning. And we are expecting more guidance from DESE on a couple of things with regards to remote learning. There has been a shift as of a few weeks ago to move beyond enrichment activities and into curriculum and standards that teachers felt they could go deeper with. Now the idea is we may be getting some guidance on how we can engage students for the remainder of the school year in remote learning in power standards that are going to be essential for them to hit the ground running in the fall. I think we recognize that some students are going to have different levels of success being able to work in a remote learning environment. It does require a certain set of skills. Some of our students, that is what we're working on, are some of those skill sets. So in addition to considering how to move forward in the remote learning, we are, as the leadership team with guidance from DESE, trying to figure out what interventions and supports may be needed over the summer so that we can catch students and catch them up. Basically, some of our students will not make progress in our standards, so we will have to identify those students and
Cheryl, the only one who froze? Yes.
Yeah.
Cheryl, we can't hear you.
about that is that it seems like
Cheryl?
there may be, yes,
Cheryl? We lost you at one point, so
okay. It was so good. It was so good.
it was about
so good.
6:30 when we stopped hearing you. So if you can,
That's it.
I
It's
actually
I'm
looked
home
at the
because I'm all done now. So, did we hear about power standards?
No.
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right, so let me go back to the beginning. So times two, we know that the governor just announced today that we are closing the school buildings for the remainder of the year, which means that we will be in remote learning for the remainder of the school year. So if people can nod, apparently my internet is intermittent. It just came up and said, you're having a tough time here, Cheryl. So for everyone in the Commonwealth, it does mean that we are moving into remote learning for the remainder of the school year. There is a shift from even the original remote learning plan, which was for us to go deeper into some standards that teachers felt in their professional judgment the majority of students would be successful in, to working with DESE to identify the power standards that students need to receive instruction in, so that when they come back in the fall, they're able to hit the ground running and they haven't missed basically the last 5 weeks of school. So we're working with DESE and expecting some guidance from DESE to identify those standards for teachers and then create the online experiences for students. And I do think that that gets into a little bit of what we've been talking about with Stephanie and some of the concern around how to do that online environment safely for students. We've been working with David around some of the safety and security issues, both in Google Meet and in Zoom. We continue to work with them. We are very close to what we feel have identified and Google is now solving for us in terms of safety and security for students. One of our biggest concerns is that if a teacher has a Google Meet and doesn't log out properly, students can on the back end go into that Google Meet at any time. That meet does not end. And so students could go into that environment and have a chat that is unsupervised. So Google is aware of this and they are working to rectify that. And we just, at this point, are not comfortable rolling that out for our elementary students. We feel like that should be addressed within the next week. And Zoom, as you know, has plenty of its issues that have been in the media regarding student security and the potential for people to Zoom bomb, even in this environment. We're very cautious of that. So we are leaning toward Meet. I think we're very close to having all of the issues addressed. So we're hopeful that we will provide training for staff to move into Meet for all of our students at the elementary level in the near future. One of the things I think that is optimistic for us is that I do believe that there is funding coming for remote learning resources, and that includes things that we have already spent money on in terms of Chromebooks and network infrastructure and hardware for.
Did she freeze for anybody else?
Yes, but now we know it was that
Yeah.
hardware.
Cheryl?
What's important is to remember where she cut off.
It was that hardware. All right,
You froze again.
But you got the hardware this time.
Yeah.
I'm almost done, so it's good.
Yeah, you were speaking about the hardware funding.
Okay, so we're hopeful that there is federal funding that will be coming to Massachusetts to help districts like ours who had to make some substantial infrastructure upgrades to allow one-to-one to happen because we were not currently a one-to-one district. So we're very hopeful, not only from the federal government, but from the state government, that there's emergency monies that are being requested by the governor as we speak to allow us to recoup some of those costs and even move forward and improve our remote learning environment for teachers and students. And lastly, but while I have a little bit more internet, the The MCAS competency determinations for seniors, we are waiting on guidance from DESE. Obviously, students cannot take MCAS at this point, so we are waiting for some guidance on competency determinations for graduation, but also for our students in grade 9 and 10 who would have taken their science, what that is going to look like. And now that we're closed for the year in terms of coming into the building, we're expecting guidance from DESE within the next week for that. So I think that's all I have for remote learning, except to say thank you very much to the admin team for their work in creating this, building this plane as we've been flying it, for the staff who have really just done an amazing job of trying to learn and implement at the same time. They have been really supportive of each other and also of their students. And so thank you again to all students and families, because they've really had to pick up, it's a heavy lift to do a lot of this work at home. So we appreciate everything that everybody's doing. And we have received a lot of good feedback, both in suggestions, but also in celebrations of the work that's been going on. So thank you to everybody.
Good.
So I think this is just me speaking. Feel free if you speak up if you disagree with me. But I think we need to keep this on our agenda as a standing item, at least through the fall, because I'm just not sure what we're going to see for updates over the next few months and what the school years, for next year is going to actually look like.
Yep.
I just think this is going to be very fluid over the next couple of months. Do you guys disagree? Do you not want it as a standing item? I just think it's worth having here. If there's no updates at that time, then we just quickly go over it with no updates.
That makes sense.
That's fine.
All right. Finance committee.
So just a quick question on that one. So I think even the governor mentioned that because this is something new to all of us, there will be some discrepancy in the way what some students get and others don't. Does DESE have any plans to make up for what that means? I mean, typically it doesn't have to be education. In anything, if there is a gap somewhere, if you just let two individuals start at the same time and there's a gap, either you have a good plan to make up for it, or just they end up carrying that load with them and they go forward with that handicap.
Yeah.
Do you know whether there are plans to accommodate or to make up for the gaps that this is causing, at least this year, as we are getting used to it?
That's a great question. I would say at the DESE level, no. I think there's an expectation that and an understanding that these gaps are going to occur, and they're going to occur for a lot of different reasons. I think our work at the administrative level, at the team level, really is about doing exactly what you're talking about, which is right now thinking about how can we assess students in meaningful ways to identify where the gaps are and then provide the support and the instruction that students are going to need. So really that's going to be our focus over the next few months. And again, we've purchased MAP and we've been using MAP, and that's a great tool, but we have to wait a little bit for MAP because MAP really is about testing. If students test in January at this level, the idea is that students receive instruction, and then in May, when they test again, there's this level of anticipated growth because instruction has occurred. I think right now what we're going to see is we cannot assume that the same kind of instruction has happened. And so using MAP in that way, I think, is going to be difficult. So part of what we're talking about the team level is how do we create assessments for students so that we truly know whether they've maintained or whether they're grade level or whether they need support. either over the summer or coming back. So that's really going to be the bulk of our instructional and curriculum work and assessment work over the next couple of months. I think we're well positioned to do that. There are some quicker types of assessment that we can do with students to give us a feel. And then once we start instructing, I think we can use our teachers' professional judgment around whether or not students continue to need that, or, some of our students, this is very traumatic for, and maybe they're not learning well right now, but when they come back and they're back in school and they're with their friends and with their teachers, they're going to be more successful. So I think there's a lot that we have to consider and plan for. And again, to Mike's point, whether we're even here in buildings or what that looks like when we come back in September is all part of the conversation.
Yeah. And I think this kind of highlights some of the gaps that we've been talking about for a while.
Yes.
And these are gaps in our overall educational system. When you try to translate a system that is primarily based on an instructor delivering in a classroom setting, and you try to convert that to a technology-based learning, and you expect that there will be engagement by the students, they have to know what that means. They have to understand how to engage, and they have to really get the best of it. And then the teachers become their coaches, and they become support mechanism.
Yes.
And we're not, overall, this is not just Granby. I know that we're not there yet. Hopefully, that's why I asked whether DESE's doing something about it, because I'm hoping that they see this as a wake-up call overall. Just talking about technology and all that on their part is all good, but if they're not really reinforcing a technology-based education or student-led education, then anytime we're going to find ourselves in this type of situation, some kids will be disadvantaged, and that's not fair.
Absolutely. Yep.
I feel like this also goes back to the whole Blizzard bag thing. We were at a little bit of an advantage because we had that, but then DESE was going away from that. So I find it very interesting because those districts, from people that I know that had the Blizzard bags, felt like they were in, better shape, had some kind of meat around it. So I'm wondering if there'll be long-term implications from that as well, if they might revisit that, like you had talked about, redo what it is that they're doing, because what they're saying in the news is that this is not going to be a one-time occurrence. Like, it's not going to be a once in a century type of thing now that we're such a global community, right? So
it's just very difficult. I feel so bad for the kids. The teachers are doing all they can, but there's nothing that duplicates that teacher standing in front of the kids in the classroom day after day, assessing what they're doing, knowing what they can do and not do. This has got to be very difficult for everyone.
So you brought up, Cheryl, you brought up something, I'm not sure I understood it. I just want to make sure I do understand it. The map testing, I get what you're saying. It's not going to show us growth, but is there the ability within the district to do some sort of testing at home so that we can get a baseline as to where the students are now?
Right. So, that's something that we're looking at. What can we do in terms of assessments? It could be that we look at the literature and the math series that we use and look at some of the unit assessments that are in those materials and supplies. Much of that is available online, but it's sort of putting the cart before the horse a little bit. We need to make sure that we're assessing the right standards. So once the standards are addressed, and these are the standards that we know we need to focus on in these last weeks of school in remote learning, then we can make sure that.
Oh, she froze.
Froze again.
Come on, Cheryl.
Her remote experience is not a good one.
Well, not today.
I think she's
Last
back.
time it was me.
Did I lose you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you did.
So let's say.
Yeah, go ahead.
So let's say, for example, DESE decides, with input from teachers and from superintendents and curriculum folks, that time is an essential power standard that kids need to know. When kids come back to school, when we do a quick assessment of, clock telling or time telling, if they can't do it, then our intervention is whole class. Versus, if 50% of the kids can tell time, then we've got to figure out very quickly, all right, which of these kids really need some direct instruction, some small group work around time, and how can we structure some things for other kids so that they continue moving forward. I think that's what we're going to see moving forward in the fall.
So
Okay,
when are we supposed to get those power standards?
So they're working on them right now. What I heard this morning was they're hoping for next week. Probably by the end of the week, they're going to identify those standards.
Cheryl, presently, are everybody just focusing on reading and math? Are you doing science, social studies, all the standards, or are you focusing on mainly reading and math?
I think that there are lessons and activities designed for all content areas. Remember, when this started, we were really focused on keeping kids in the learning mindset. So if we had students that were really interested in science, that was our leverage point in for students to keep them interested and engaged. So an activity might be, hey, go to weather.com and chart the weather over, the week. And so I think those are the kinds of activities that teachers had been creating for students, because again, we were more in the engagement, learning mindset, as opposed to teaching new standards.
Right.
So
that makes sense. So you might
that conversation will now change.
Right. Probably do some cross-curricular kind of things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I think the other thing to remember is that we are very fortunate that David and Stacy were able to transition us very quickly to one-to-one. And so our remote learning plan is pretty well established now for students to have access pretty much K through 12. I think we have to be realistic that throughout the Commonwealth, that is not essentially the same. And so some districts are looking at things that the commissioner is saying are sufficient, like still going to paper packets, reading lists, just simple reading lists for students to engage in while they're home, doing remote learning. We are doing remote learning in an online environment for the most part. We do have a lot of activities where kids are going outside and looking up letters of the alphabet in the arts, and working with our art teachers in that way. So it's exciting, but primarily our kids are going into the Google Classroom, getting assignments, getting ideas, getting instruction. So we really are bearing the benefit of all of the work that the teachers have done around Blizzard bags, all of the work groups that they've been engaged in with Google Classroom. So we are really well positioned for the majority. And we do have some staff who are concerned and not quite, feeling comfortable yet. And like our students, we need to wrap around everyone to make sure that they have the support they need so that they're comfortable making, the instruction accessible for all their students.
Good.
All right, anything else? Okay, and we're gonna make this as part of the old business for at least a few months. I would think.
Sounds good.
Okay. The threshold for past due school lunch balances. I think that's Adam again.
Yeah, so we talked about this last week in some detail. Like, I just want to recommend, I guess, an amount to set for us to then go after these past due lunch balances. In the past, it's been $5. I would recommend anything over $10 we should go after. But I would like to vote so then we can get a start on recovering some of these past due lunch balances that total a pretty good amount. So I would recommend 10. I think that's a good number, but I'm not sure if anybody else has any other ideas on an amount.
I think $10 might be a good place to start. There's a lot of money above the $10 range.
if you
Yes,
look at-
there sure is.
Yeah, if you look at the second line, that's over $1,000 right there, right? So.
Yep.
Um,
I think it
And
just
this
gives
is-
us a good starting point.
So out of
Yeah,
the
this-
one, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, this is separate though. I think we already talked about it last meeting as to what was meant when you said, go after, right? I mean, on the surface, that sounds a little rough, but I think you laid out for us the last
Yeah,
meeting.
so trying to recover some of these balances. So I had talked about it last meeting a little bit. We've tried in the past, and the school secretaries have tried in the past and are still trying. I took it one step a little further and had reached out to Steve Nally to see if there was something he could help us out with from the town side. I had thought maybe a demand notice, and we talked about it. It's more costly to go through the demand notice process, and you have to go to court and all that stuff. It just wouldn't make fiscal sense to go through it that way. But what he did agree to would, if I drafted up some type of letter, it would come from his office. That was one part of it, and the other part is kind of being more consistent with going after these balances and making sure families are aware of the balances in a more consistent, timely manner, and just being able to try to have a process in place to recover these balances moving forward. It's not for lack of trying, at least at the school level. I just feel at this point, and you guys can see the balances are getting up there. It's a pretty significant amount of past due balances, and I feel like we just need to take it a little more seriously and just try a new way of getting out to these families that we can work with you. If there's, if you have a past due balance, we don't need it all in one if you can't. It's more of let's work together to try to recoup as much of this as possible.
What has happened so far, Adam? I know you talked about last time. How did these get so high, and whose main responsibility is to try to get the money back? Is it Chartwell? Is it the school?
Yeah, no, it's not Chartwell's. Although they certainly play a part in kind of helping us recoup some of this. Ultimately, and Bill has suggested this in the past, and I'm not sure if he commented last meeting, but it should be a business office procedure. For right now, the secretaries at the schools are doing it. And I agree, it should probably be taken out of their hands and into the business office. So again, this would be the first step. Voting on a threshold would be the first step in coming up with a formal process on how the district would go about recovering negative lunch balances.
Is this one of those fees? Sorry, is this one of those fees that would need to be settled up before graduation? Like if there's any that are seniors for whatever? Yeah. Yep.
So again, and we touched on this a little bit last time. So there are a few fees that go. No, that's okay. There are a few fees that Steven and the high school make sure are paid before kids get their cap and gown. This is kind of a separate in and of itself fee, but yes, we would like to have all fees for seniors. I want to be clear though, these are fees that are the students might not even be with us anymore, but we want to reach out because they owe a significant amount of money. These are families and students that are still with us. So there's kind of a two-part process to this. But yes, there is a system in place, at least at the high school, that would they wouldn't be able to get their cap and gown unless all of their outstanding fees and dues are paid up at that time.
And then I know we talked about this one last time, but when we were going to get this list, we were going to, I think you were going to check to see how many of those people were, free wouldn't be an issue, but reduced, do reduced lunches count in this as well? Like if people are having trouble
So,
I'm just thinking
again, yeah.
if I was in trouble right now, getting a message that my kid's lunch that I'm not going back to school for is
Totally. So again, and like I said last time, I had put this on the agenda for last meeting way before any of this started. So I understand now starting to send letters out. And I'm not saying once we vote tonight, we're going to send a letter out tomorrow.
okay.
It's more, I would have liked to do that maybe 2 or 3 months ago when I thought of this and put it on the agenda. Now it would be, let's just get a threshold and let's maybe start working on the actual process. And then maybe for the start of next school year, we can start implementing, that process or parts of it. I would certainly not now in this time, hey, you might be laid off and we don't have school, but by the way, can you pay your students pass through lunch balance? I understand that's obviously not the road we want to go down right now. So.
Adam, can you remind us what's the average cost of lunch right now? It doesn't have to be exact.
Yeah, so it's a little under $3 is the average price per lunch right now. $2.87, I believe it is.
Yeah, I think that's what you said last.
So what I'm trying to get to is, if we go with the $10 amount, that's about 3 meals.
Mm-hmm.
Is that realistic that, in 3 days something will turn around and, we're expecting that? Or should we just have that threshold a little different?
So, again, I would say that's not entirely up to you guys, but it's certainly up to you guys to discuss. It's more the point, at least for us, it just gives us a baseline as to where we start going after these balances. I thought $10 was a significantly or a relatively fair number, but I'm open for discussion or thoughts or suggestions on something other than that.
I would think $10 is fair. You make an effort to get anybody above $10 to try to get what you can get recovered and go from there. I mean, maybe you'll do better when it's raised up a notch. It is tough if it's at the secretary level, but if it moves up a bit, say, hey, you owe this money. Can you help us out? If they owe $50, but they can pay $25, you take what they are able to afford you, and to cut this deficit down and realizing people are in tough shapes on some of these. Maybe some of these people are in worse shape now.
Mm-hmm.
But make an effort to get what you can, and I think the rest has to just be eaten, I think.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, and so we're certainly not going to recover 100% of these. Again, it's just there's no formal process or in place, and we'd like to get one in place, and then we can move forward. I'm sure this discussion's not over. This would be the first step, and we can move forward.
So when you said before that some of these kids aren't even with us anymore, were they like school choice kids? Well, they wouldn't have been kids that graduated because they wouldn't have been allowed to do it without settling a fee, right? So why would the kids been able to leave with a balance? I don't understand.
So again, they could have withdrawn for certain reasons.
Moved,
yeah.
Yeah, there's several reasons they might not be with us. They're not school. I mean, they could be school choice kids, but that's not the reason. Is because they're school choice kids.
Right. No, I
some
didn't
of them
mean
may
the
be school choice.
I'm thinking if they moved or school choiced out or something, but
right. Yep. And I want to say, and Steve, I'm not sure if he's on, if he wants to chime in and comment. I believe past due lunch balances were kind of separate from the fees that were collected prior to them getting caps and gowns. I'm not 100% sure if Steve's in here, even on the chat, he wants to chime in, but there are seniors that have graduated, I believe, that do have balances. But to answer your question, there's a variety of different reasons why there would be balances for students that are no longer in the district.
Yeah, I am on. We do try to collect the school lunch at the end of the year, but there's a variety of ways that a student that's no longer with us could potentially have a balance. They may not have participated in graduation. They might not have graduated. They might have just left. We have students who just we have students that we're working with now that are even in and out. So in those situations, sometimes the lunch debt isn't our first priority. And then when we do get caught up with them, it's about trying to track it down and have them work with us, like Adam said. But most of them do get paid off prior to graduation or when they're picking up their caps and gowns.
Thank you, Stephen.
So if you're looking for a motion, I'll make that motion, Mike.
Well, I wasn't looking for a motion. I just want to make sure that, one, this vote tonight is really just to set the first step of a standard, of saying the $10, at that point, we're going to start making an effort to try to collect. I do think it may be beneficial, when we've have a better understanding of the full, I guess all the details of what's going to happen in that part of the work happens, just so we understand better what types of letters are going to go out, when, and by whom. I know that's probably the next step. But right now, you're just looking for us to vote on a threshold, and just to get the process going.
This would be the start and the end of the process, for this current time. Once we vote it, again, based on the current climate, I'm not going to go any further, except for maybe trying to come up with some process internally, but there will be no letters, nothing that goes out to, obviously, any family in the near future.
Yeah, I apologize. I meant to say, like, right now we understand it's not in the cards, but at some point in time, we have to assume things will be, that things will be different again, and we may pick up something at that point in time.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And regardless of what we decide to do, the students will not be subjected to anything, correct? Just, this is not a conversation that will take place with them. This is something that will happen in the background, not involving the students. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. So I think we have to wait. Jen just kind of stepped away for a second.
I'm here. I just stopped video for a second. I needed to stretch.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just want to make sure that when we go into a vote that your video is back on.
Okay, here I am. Sorry.
So I'll
Right.
make a motion to establish a threshold of $10 before the school finance office moves to recover the cost of unpaid lunch money.
I'll second that
Second.
motion.
Okay. Any more discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. The next
Thank you.
item.
Thank you.
Next item is to see the discussions we've had over the joint meeting and the budget request from the Finance Committee. I don't know if you have seen the emails. I did reach out to John after our last meeting. I followed up going directly to him, indicating that we were going to probably set our hearing, and I believe that's already been posted for early May. And he had indicated that they still had a couple things. I saw that Cheryl sent those over to him the next day. I asked him for some dates and times for a mutual meeting, and still have not heard anything back from that request. What was interesting, and again, I don't know if you guys have read this email, his response back to me was that under the current circumstances, him and the Finance Committee, I believe, were looking for us to try to come up with a budget that did not include the 305. So I don't know what our next step at this point should be. I did ask for joint meetings to try to discuss that with them. And I don't know if we should be making those moves now or if we should just move forward with what we have. So any
So when
thoughts?
he's saying that, do you think he's going to get up on town floor and say to go against the 305 then? But that 305 is not a separate vote on town floor, is it? Every year?
It is. Well, it's wrapped up in the single vote. It's net school spending plus the 305, and I do believe he would because he did last year.
Last year he was okay with it.
The rest of the finance committee he was a dissenter, and that's why somebody else read the opinion.
I don't know.
I would think that in the present climate, look at it two ways, that the 305 just needs to stay where it is. Because what if we get less money from the state? State, you can't, this is not the time to touch it. Maybe in the near future with more time and discussion, but this is not the time to touch it. And I'm sure since they haven't got back to you to go over the details, I think we just let it go and it should stay in there this year.
Well, I have my own beliefs on certain things myself. One of them is the 305 should stay. I have certain opinions as to if the town needs certain things, there should be some other types of funding coming from other sources. I do understand that the town has some needs now that they didn't have before, but at the same time, so doesn't the schools. I just don't know how it looks for us to stand our ground and go out to town meeting as is, or even the hearing as is, knowing full well that they are going to they appear to be looking to make a recommendation to go without the 305.
So, Mike, what is the worst that can happen? You can go down to your net school spending, right? So I'm not sure at this point. I agree with what Jim said, that it's very late in the process, and we had multiple meetings on this topic the last so many years that I've been on the committee. I really think our perspective on education has been very short-sighted. We talked about long-term, but we could not even agree on how we should finance our school district short-term. And we are basically talking about 305 that's been okay just a couple of years ago. 2 years ago, when we had our meetings, as I recall, and it might be on some video somewhere too, we were, in a kind and joking way, welcome, saying, hey, if it's just net school spending plus 305, we don't even have to have the meetings. That was almost a motto. Suddenly, the target is moving again. And at the end of the day, a budget conversation doesn't necessarily have to be this way. I think we all agreed on that. But the nature of the funding for education in Granby was such that 305 happened to be the only buffer we had in there. There was really nothing else that we could look at. The rest of it was really negotiation, going in front of the town and just making our case and pleading. Sometimes we got it, many times we did not get it. That's why we had to cut so many positions. That's why we found ourselves in the situation that we were in. And now that we are just showing everyone that we are moving forward and we are making some improvements, suddenly that 305 becomes fair game so late in the planning process. That doesn't make any sense to me. So the reason why I'm saying, what's left is it's either net school spending or net school spending 305. If the town says we don't really want to give you the 305, and town being the town meeting, then that's a different conversation to have. But I agree with Jim. Just we would because we planned it that way, not because out of any capricious behavior, because we already had planned it that way, and we gave a lot of notice that we had planned it that way. I would just go with what we had planned, and then see what happens when we get into the discussion.
No, I am in 100% agreement with everything that has been said. I just wanted to make sure everybody understands that they are looking at us to try to do without the 305. And I personally don't think we should. I personally think we should stick with what we have out there, what's been out there since day one on our budget this year.
I agree.
And I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that this may end up as being an argument on town meeting floor. And I'm fine with that argument on town meeting floor. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of it.
So
I guess the other question too would be: are any other town departments looking at a $300,000 plus cut in their budget for this year? And I think that's a question that should be answered at some point. Because if not, then why are we the ones targeted to make a $300 reduction in our budget?
And if I might, a couple of things. We've been working really hard I think, to educate the community, educate the finance committee, educate the select board, that net school spending is not the goal. When you look at net school spending districts, you're looking at districts like Fall River, New Bedford, Lawrence, and all of those districts are either in or going into state receivership. And this idea that we just haven't seemed to tear down, that net school spending is what we should be spending and all we have to spend, that does not allow us to have the education system in Granby that Granby families want. I think we need to be very clear about that. And for whatever reason, this conversation has circled back again to we only have to give net school spending. That's an erroneous assumption. And for whatever reason, we're back at that same space. I think it's important that we begin again to have the conversation with Finance Committee Select Board that we need to be looking at a level service budget. And net schools, the parameter that we get from the town every year is not a level service budget. We've been able to make it a level service budget because we've been making adjustments within the school department. But I have been saying for the last 2 years anyway, that we will not be able to do this because our increases to contractual obligations, our increases in expenses will outstrip what we have in revolving accounts to offset these increases. So I have been saying we have probably 5 years. This economic environment has probably shortened that. So, this is going to be interesting in the next couple of years. But we really need to sit down and have the conversation that this parameter that we're given is not adequate. And I thought we were on the road to that discussion. And then this year, out of the blue, in April, March, all of a sudden we're back to we're only going to give net school spending and we want that budget. I'm with Mike. I think it's late in the season to be having that conversation. I think our budget is solid and conservative and fiscally fits within the parameters of the town. And I'm proud of that budget and the work that's gone into it. And I would like to have the opportunity to sit with FinCom and with the select board to have the same kind of conversations that we had last year, because I do think that there was a lot of understanding that came from those conversations. And so it's disheartening to once again not have the feedback or the ability to sit with these groups of people.
I find it very disheartening that they're not even getting back to us. I find that insulting a little bit. Like, they seemed very open to the idea of having this give and take and wanting to be part of, having these conversations to make the whole process go better. And it feels like we're getting radio silence on the other end, and to not wanting to have these joint meetings is upsetting.
My gut feeling would be that the Finance Committee would support this 305. You might remember, I think it reared its ugly head this year. They're not correct. When we got the first figures from the state, showed an increase of about $300,000 to Granby, right? And then someone said, oh, that's the same as the override money. So that's where it raised its ugly head. And I think, and then when the in-kind costs came our way, it was a lot more than we thought, which cut into that. So it seems to me it needs to stay where it is. And my gut reaction would be the Finance Committee in a vote would support the schools still keeping the 305.
Yeah, I sincerely hope so, and I don't anticipate us being able or actually think it's a good idea to make any adjustments. I just wanted everybody aware, since now we are really up against our hearing deadline.
And Mike, I think that's why you have not heard back from them, because the vast majority, I think, support the schools still keeping the 305. That's my gut as to why you have not heard back.
Okay. So we're all good still about keeping, what is it, the May 5th, hearing date as is, Cheryl?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
And so that's just the hearing, right? That's for where we present it to whoever wants to come, but that's not writing the article for town meeting or anything like that, right?
Well,
That's just going over it
so after the hearing, I believe we're scheduled to
vote on it.
that night. I think we're scheduled to convene to vote on it, and at that point, it
Right.
gets submitted over to the town to write the warrant. Is that correct?
Okay. And then, so my next follow-up question, I'm still learning about how a lot of these processes work, so bear with me. But then, so we write our article, we have it with our budget for the 305, and it gets voted down on town floor. The way I've understood it in the past is if the budget doesn't get passed at town meeting, then the school doesn't get any money. And then we don't have any operating budget. So I know that's usually when
No.
they make an amendment or something to get rid of the 305 or whatever, right? So what happens next? What happens if we do what we want to do, but then town floor doesn't give us the 305? What do we do then?
So because the 305 is separate, I'm assuming our I'll call it net school spending amount would be approved, and then the 305 wouldn't be approved. At that point, if I believe, Jen, that's what you're saying. Our main budget is approved, but the additional 305 is not approved. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
At that point, I think there's nothing we would be able to do.
So, right, my understanding is that when the school committee votes their budget, that's what gets sent to Chris to get put on the warrant. That
Okay.
our budget right now is the parameter that we were given, the net school spending plus 305. That's the warrant as written. Unless there's a change between now and town meeting, then finance committee at the town meeting would have to make an amendment. Or argue that they were not in support, or they were in support, which is what they do every year. They're either in support of the budget or not in support of the budget. For the first couple of years that I was here, it was very difficult. They were not in support of the budget. We were on town meeting floor. We were asking for lots of money. It was a scary time. But they were very supportive of the budget on town meeting floor. And that would be my understanding moving into this year. Like Mr. Petrus said, that would be my hope, because we have not heard contrary to that. But I also, to Mike's point, don't want to be naive, but they would have to not support the budget as we put it forward. But they couldn't say, oh, we're going to give you net school spending, but we're not going to give you the 305. Like, they would have to, we are going to put forward a full number.
Yeah, right. So that's why I wanted to clear it up, Jen, because if at town meeting floor, that full number doesn't get approved, it doesn't mean we aren't funded. There's legislation in place that says if your budget that you're proposing doesn't get funded, you revert back to what you were approved for last year, and they increment it in 1/12 allocations until you can come up with a approved budget. So there'd have to be a special town meeting where they would approve a revised budget, and then that would be our FY21 budget going forward. But if it took us, I'm just throwing this out there, 2 or 3 months to get a budget approved, they would go back to our fiscal year 20 budget, break that out into 12 increments, and allocate it on a per month basis until we had a fiscal year 21 budget approved. So we wouldn't go without funding. Just to be clear, I'm not sure if that's what you meant. That's what I heard, but I just wanted to be clear. Well, it's not like we wouldn't get any money. We would get it. It would just be in a different. It would be allocated differently.
It was kind of what I was asking, and I probably sound naive, which I guess I am with some of that stuff. But I know that has been said on town floor. Like, if we don't get this, and we don't vote on the budget, then there's nothing there. So. Or if, we vote down the budget the way sometimes the amendments are written or whatever. So I just want to make sure that we're aware of what might happen, or like, I'm sure you all are. I was not aware of what happens if we don't get it.
Well, I just want to be very positive, and I think in these difficult times that we should have no problem getting the school budget approved. Really, I don't think it'd be an issue.
I really hope so. I just want to keep this on the agenda, and I just wanted everybody aware that it's not like we have not been able to meet with FinCom like we had hoped to, and I don't have any real, I don't have anything from them saying that they're okay with what our plans are. I just wanted that out there.
Thank you.
So now we're on to FY 21 budget.
I mean, there's essentially, I think we just had the conversation. There's really, as far as I know, no update. Not to scare anybody, but again, there's been talks about reduced funding for next year based on the current situation at this point. It's all hearsay. There is no definitive answer if we're going to have reduced budget next year. So the talk is out there. Again, it's all hearsay at this point. So as as we've been told, kind of at the state level, we have state finance calls with Jay Sullivan.
I think Adam just wasn't Cheryl this time. It was Adam.
I told Addie she had to get offline. She's all mad at me. I'm like, Addie, you can't be online right now.
We'll be done pretty soon, tell her.
That's what I said. People, let's go. I'm going to have an angry 15-year-old in a minute. It's going to get ugly here.
That's why I'm on Lance's iPad. He was like, no way. You can't take my Chromebook away from me tonight.
I'm counting the items right here.
Almost done.
Netflix. It's killing me.
Netflix party.
Oh, God.
So I don't know where I left off, but real quick, again, there's no updates. We're moving forward. Again, there's hearsay about cuts next year. That's all talk right now. There's nothing definitive. And obviously, as I have more information on that, I will let everyone know. But as of right now, we are, kind of, I guess, waiting to hear back from Finance Committee, or we're just going to move forward for the May 5th public hearing and go from there.
That's all we can do. We can't control what's going to happen next year or anything. We have no control over that, so we really can't worry about it. Everyone will be in the same boat. If the state doesn't get the funds and cuts it back, well, we'll deal with it. It'll have to be dealt with as it comes. But we have enough to worry about now without worrying about that.
So one of the things I want to remind the committee about is if you start hearing things like the Student Opportunity Act funding is not going to be in the amount that was initially proposed in the legislation. Granby was not a recipient of a lot of Student Opportunity Act funding. Our increases came in the required net school spending on the town side. So if you start hearing like, oh, they're cutting the Student Opportunity Act funding, just take a big deep breath because that probably isn't going to impact us. It's more the urban districts and the districts with high special education and EL costs. So, I don't have a crystal ball either, but there is going to be quite I think you're going to start to hear some of the panic out there around the revenue projections for next year and what that means. I'd also like to remind the committee that I think many of you were around in 2008 when there were the ERA funds that came, and those were substantial, and they were specifically targeted toward employment, keeping Americans employed. So if I had a crystal ball, I will be begging through my crystal ball to legislatures around employment because our industry, and particularly in Granby, the largest percent of our budget is salary and keeping people employed. So if we can manage to leverage some federal ERA-like grants, some state ERA-like money for employment, I think we'll be okay. But if you're concerned, please reach out so we can talk about what you're hearing and what you're seeing. And I think together we can, have our feelers out, but I don't want anybody to panic yet. I think we're pretty well positioned, and I do think the town is well positioned as well. They have been and continue to be very conservative, and this is probably one of that benefits to that type of budgeting, that there are stabilization accounts to get us through some situations like this. And I think if we work together and we're conservative in our budgets and continue that we will be okay.
I would say real quick, I think one area that we would see probably a reduction in revenue is in circuit breaker, and only because a lot of the services that would get us over that third circuit breaker threshold are Not that they're not necessarily being provided right now, but they're certainly not being provided in the capacity they would be if we were in school. But that is still an ongoing conversation on what costs we can throw into circuit breaker now, how much service these providers are actually giving our students. But I'm pretty confident, unfortunately, that we would see a reduction in circuit breaker revenue. No one has any idea of what that might look like, but that would have an impact on next year. Again, I'm confident we will see a reduction. As to what that might be, we're kind of too far out at this point. There's a lot of unanswered questions at this point to know the level of severity that would impact that revenue. So.
The costs that we have built into the budget for the special education for next year, does any of that need to be relooked at with the understanding that we don't even know what the next school year is actually going to look like? Like, is anybody going to address some of those thoughts?
Yeah, I'll make Carol do it.
Like, I'm not looking for answers tonight.
No,
I just want to make sure that we're looking at all of this stuff.
Yeah. So one of the things that we have to be careful about, and we've been talking about, are making sure that we're working with our families, particularly our students on 504 and IEPs, to make sure that they are making progress. And if they aren't making progress, what that might look like in the summer so that we can help kids make that progress. I'm particularly concerned about our social emotional learning students. Much of their work in their goals is around, obviously, social, working in groups. That obviously in an online environment is very challenging. We're doing our best with that, but I think our social emotional programming is very strong when kids are in school, and we're moving into a remote environment to support students, but I do think we're going to have to work with parents and families and make some adjustments over the summer and as students come back. So yes, there'll be costs certainly to doing that work, and it is something that, in addition to how we instruct students when they come back and make catch-up growth, these are parts of the conversation that the leadership team are having to move forward and have a good plan in place for the summer really, and the fall.
Cheryl,
And I
just
was also
a quick question. How are they going to do all the team meetings for the special ed kids? How are they going to do all
Yeah,
that?
so I don't want to speak out of turn. Yep, they are having them. If I speak out of turn, maybe Carol, if she's there, can help out. But what I would say is we are having many of our meetings online. They're going very well. Our new meetings, students that would be new into special education or 504, I don't believe we're having those. But again, if Carol's there, if she's there, I don't think those are the meetings. Oh, there she is.
Take care of the present ones first, I'm sure.
Right. Which meetings, Carol? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Hi, everyone. So we are having, for those meetings that testing was completed, we've held some initial meetings through Zoom. We have held some reevaluation meetings, and we are moving forward with annual meetings. So we are trying to maintain timelines. If a reeval meeting was, if the testing was completed, we're holding that meeting. I'm still waiting for some guidance from Essie as far as timelines for these things. They're coming slow with their information, but they're recommending that we work with families. It's not humanly possible for us to test all of the kids that were due in the spring and in the fall. So, we're going to have to do some juggling. But if we have the testing completed, we are holding the meetings, and we are clearly holding all annual meetings with parents that are willing to participate remotely.
Well, thanks for doing all that.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's actually been very good. It gives us a chance to see how the kids are doing, you know, and talk to the parents about how they are doing remotely. And we are also designing individual learning plans for all of the students on IEPs. So I've been working with staff, and those will be going out. Some of them will go out this week, and some of them will go out next week.
Okay. Thanks for that update.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think what I was trying to get to, and maybe worded it poorly, was would we be expecting any of the costs to go up simply because of certain things may be full and they may want to charge more to
So you actually worded the question perfectly. I actually didn't answer it.
Okay.
So our anticipation of increased cost would be if we're providing additional services for students who are here with us. But you did mention, or implied, our students that are in out-of-district placements, will there be less available to us? I think Carol can speak to that.
So we are currently funding our out-of-district placements, and the out-of-district schools are providing individual learning plans for students and tracking their progress. Our in-district kids, some of them are doing great with the virtual learning. We're able, through Google Classroom, through Google Meet, through Zoom meetings, meeting their needs. But some of our higher needs students are kids that need discrete trials in our ABA room. It's really hard to have a student that's used to having someone sitting right next to them, directing them, to try and do it through a Google Meet. And so those are the students that, yes, we are going to have to catch them up. And it's not from our lack of trying. I know the ABA teacher is constantly in touch with the families and trying to engage with the students, but it's a different medium that the kids are struggling with.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think your picture.
She's emerging from the background.
That's so cool, Addie. Wow.
She's like, time's up, Mom.
No, now they can. You gotta get in closer. There she is. Oh,
there she is.
I see her.
I just got homemade popcorn.
Addie, did you hear that? Yeah, homemade. She's working. I'm working. You're making.
Whirly Pop. Way to go.
Whirly Pop.
We might actually have popcorn.
We do have popcorn. Sure.
Do we need to discuss the town meeting June 8th anymore, or the hearing?
Well, will it even still be June 8th with the schools closed through the year now, or?
Yeah. So the question to us was, if the schools were closed, could the facilities still be used? Yes, absolutely. I think we would get guidance from the Board of Health in terms of a municipal response and expectation for social distancing and being able to hold the meeting. We'll have to wait for that, but that's on the town side. I responded that the buildings are available.
In this June 8th meeting, just so I can get it clear in my head, is usually the first one where they kind of wrap up, move money to the reserve accounts, and then adjourn and postpone the rest of the meeting until the next one.
22nd, I think.
Right.
So I wonder if we're still going to expect that to happen with this. Okay. I don't think any of us has the answer to that. It's just thinking. Yep. Okay. So then the next item is the grade 6 pilot.
Sure. So just get up my file. So as we discussed at the last school committee meeting, a survey was sent out to parents and guardians of the current grade 5 students to determine whether they and their students may be interested in participating in a pilot next year. After providing the recipients of the survey a high-level description of the program, we asked them the following question: would you be interested in helping develop and participate in this pilot program with us? So first of all, thank you very much. We had 37 parents and guardians who responded to the survey. Of the 37 respondents, 22 expressed a strong or some interest in the pilot program, with specifically 8 saying yes and 14 maybe, and then 15 did say that they did not have any interest in participating.
Define the 22 for me, please.
Sorry?
The 22 is the, say the numbers again.
8 with a yes, an absolute
Okay.
yes, and then 14 with a maybe. And actually 1 came in today with a yes, so that's a 9 yes and 14 maybe. Many of the respondents also provided comments and thoughtful questions helped us better understand the additional details you would like to have to move forward. With that said, while our administrative team was focusing on this work, over the last 2 weeks, the world around us has continued to change due to the coronavirus pandemic. Although we are hopeful that we will be able to return to classrooms later this semester, today the governor confirmed that we will not be returning to the school buildings for the remainder of the school year. Equally important is the economic uncertainty of the next several months and its potential financial impact on the state, local, and school budgets. So in light of all of this and the rapid changing information and these continuing uncertainties, we've decided to pause this work related to the pilot and also other similar effort. Again, the information is coming to us very rapidly. The administrative team is working really hard to ensure that our decisions reflect our collective understanding of this information and this changing landscape. And our goal truly is to remain focused on ensuring that students know they are safe, that their teachers are safe, and that we are doing everything we can to make sure that we're keeping everyone as safe as possible, and that our second goal is to make sure that students are staying in the learning mindset. Again, we need to take a pause here because this information is coming so quickly. I don't want to miss anything, and I certainly don't want to overcommit to anything. So we need to take a pause, see where we're at with any more changing information before we move forward. I do want to say thank you again for the responses and questions and comments. We will continue the conversation around how we can find new and innovative ways to improve the education we provide to our students in the Granby Public Schools. Any thoughts?
No, I really agree. There's just far too many variables right now for us to account for. We can't even sit here and collectively figure out what school is going to look like for anybody next year, right? So, I think it's a little bit too much to bite off right now. But it also answered, an important question, which was, would there have been any interest, had we decided to pursue, right?
Yep.
Anybody else have anything they want to add?
No.
Okay. East Meadow class size. This, after a lot of thinking, is what I came up with as a placeholder for us to figure out what we need to do over the next year, what we committed to doing within the next year. As far as reconfiguring East Meadow School to get three classes per grade. That being said, again, class sizes may actually be more dictated to us by state, more than anything else. So I don't know right now, but this is really just a placeholder item.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody thinks it should be labeled something else, feel free to reach out to me or say something. But for now, that's what that's going to mean. Is that's our discussion point for what we need to do to get ready to meet our goal of having this resolved by the end of next year. Right?
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions on that? All right. We're into standing reports. Superintendent report. Do you have one? Or did you give one?
I'm really stressed out. I'm just going to say it. We are.
Cheryl, your daughter's your report. That's enough.
Yeah. There, I got popcorn and soda. What can I say? I think, like everyone, we had been waiting for the announcement from the governor regarding what the rest of the year was going to look like. I think we had all been sort of collectively holding our breath. Now that we know, we will move forward to make sure that all of our students and our staff, as I said, feel comfortable moving forward with more detail and more instruction going on in the remote learning environment, which also means wrapping around services to students that we know are having trouble. So that will be our work for the remainder of the school year, in addition to the budget and financing of things. You know, I do want to say thank you to the administrative team. They have been amazing. They have been handing out Chromebooks, serving lunches, driving things to families. I can't say enough about the paraprofessionals who participated in those activities too. And just thank you to the staff. This has been, on the one hand, a very incredibly challenging time for everyone. But on the other hand, as stressful as it is, it's been amazing to see how people come together, especially in a town like Granby. Really, the support for everyone has been amazing. And I feel like now we know what our end date is for sure. And so if people are feeling isolated, left out, concerned, please reach out. We are here. We're just here in a different venue. And we don't want anyone to feel like they can't support their student in their learning. As I've said in the remote learning plan, this isn't a competition. We're not out on Facebook looking to see who's got the best class agenda or daily agenda for students. We can do this together, and in the fall we'll reconnect hopefully and be back to business more as usual.
Thank you.
Carol, do we know what this means for our graduation?
Oh, I was just going to ask that.
Actually, Stephen had to apologize. He had to put the girls to bed. But he does have a statement regarding graduation. I will put it in your folder for you. Basically, we have been talking about graduation when the first round of closure to the school buildings came. We had been working with students and staff and advisors around what does it look like? I mean, obviously we've now having to look at the whole of the spring season for our upper class friends, proms and senior nights and all of those kinds of things. But specific to graduation, they are going to pull together a work group to make sure that all of our stakeholder voices are heard. And we will be doing something. And we will be working with the Board of Health and also the police and fire to make sure that we are safe, but that we do something to celebrate the achievements of our seniors. So stay tuned. My hope is that probably by our May 5th meeting, we will have some updates on the work that's been happening and some more details about what to expect.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, anything else?
That's it for me.
The next item is the business office and facilities report. I don't know if Adam has anything.
Yeah, so I placed in your folders last week a year-to-date comparison. Emily likes to call it the run rate from last year compared to this year. We're pretty close. And actually, I'm sure you guys can guess why we're off at least 2%, and that's for transportation, at least through this point. So other than that, we are right on schedule. This is through the month of March. So I would suspect the next report, and I can provide these at each meeting if you'd like going forward instead of once a month. I would suspect that we'll start seeing some decrease in percentage for this year compared to last year, just based on us not being there. But I that's an assumption. I'm not sure. But again, I can provide these reports every meeting throughout the end of the year instead of just once a month if you guys would like it that way.
I like to see this stuff. I don't know how the rest of you feel. I don't know if we really want to spend a lot of time talking about it, but at least having it in there.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you.
Yep. And then facilities wise, up until today, our custodians had been working, getting the building clean, sanitized. The guidance from the state prior to today, and I'm interested to see how it will change going forward. But prior to today, the guidance was for custodial staff not to be doing any summer project work. It should have been mainly focused on getting buildings clean, sanitized, and ready for kids to get back to school. Obviously, with today's news, we won't be having kids back at school. So I talked to John Sullivan today. Our talk was pretty brief, but we are going to have the custodians starting to do a lot of the work that they would be doing over the summer. The high school, as we all know, needs some attention inside and out. And as unfortunate as this period is, we do get a few-month jump start on getting some of those things taken care of inside. So there'll be a long list that John and I and the rest of the admin team will go over as to what projects we will do in the next coming months. But up until today's news, the directive from the state was custodians should only be performing work that was directly related to cleaning, sanitizing, and having the school ready for kids and staff to return. So again, that will certainly change. But that's pretty much it on the facility sides of things.
I do have a question about facility stuff, and I don't know if it's to you, Adam, or to Cheryl, or to who, but I mean, kids have stuff in their desks and in their lockers and things like that. So are we going to have like a day where it's, A through O goes at a certain time? Or?
Yeah. So that is something that we have to work with the Board of Health on. What kind of social distancing expectations we need to have in place for that to happen safely. And what it looks like in terms of, to your point, is it, 10 kids at a time? Like what exactly is that? So part of the conversation for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure there was like one of the options earlier was if your kids had some medication at the school, they could either leave it for a return or pick it up. So, that's like having something in the desk as far as I'm concerned. It's something that needs to get picked up from the school by the family. The one thing I wanted to bring up, Adam, I know we talked about it real quick last week or last meeting, but what is the impact of this going to have on Chartwells? I know we stopped collecting money, and I know they're still doing service, and I know they're not doing it for free, right? There's going to be a fee in there, and what really bothers me is they looked so good this year. To close it out this way is not fair to them, right?
Yeah. So again, it's one of those continuing question and answer at the state level as to how that's going to look. Because again, they're working 2 days a week for at least for us. I know in East Hampton, unless something's changed, they were there 2 or 3 days a week as well, serving a lot more meals than we were in Granby. So their staff is working in both districts. Obviously, they're incurring operational costs, and obviously we're not generating the revenue to offset those costs. So again, it's one of the many topics that's at the state level that really, I don't want to say it doesn't have an answer, because I'm certain they're talking about it. We just don't know what the answer will be. So unfortunately, it's a kind of a stay tuned. As I have more information, I'll certainly provide it to the committee. But yeah, I understand they were we were doing good work. It started last year. It picked up steam this year with providing half-day lunches, bag lunches, some options that we didn't necessarily offer in the past. So yes, it's unfortunate that this happened on many levels, but certainly for them, again, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and this just happens to be one of them. So,
Right. That's, I just
No
wanted to put
blueprint
that
to
out.
follow there.
what's that?
There's no blueprint to follow there, right?
Yeah, no, and again, it's as I've been saying the last few meetings, I've been on transportation calls and how do we reimburse transportation vendors that haven't provided services, and how do we reimburse out of district schools that aren't necessarily providing 100% services. Again, there's a lot going on at the state level, so it's certainly not criticizing them, but it's the same questions each week and the same answers. There's really no headway that's been made, and maybe it's because they were building to the decision that they made today, and now maybe that decision's made, we will have some more definitive answers going forward. Again, yeah, there's a lot of questions and not that many answers at this point. So,
Right. So is there anything else anybody wanted to bring up here? Because
I have a couple other questions just related to the fact that we know that school is done. Last year and the year before, we had announcements for scholarships. We had people to meetings. And just, I'm just thinking of all these things. My niece is a senior. I'm devastated for her.
Yep.
And everyone's asking. So I'm just trying to,
Can you do me a favor and send me that in an email?
Sure.
I want to make sure that we don't miss anything. But now that we know where we're at, I think some of us were balancing being hopeful that we would be back with safety. If we were back, then some of these things would naturally occur. We're going to have to change now. If you're looking at the app, we're starting to post where kids are going to school, where they've been accepted, things like that. So we're going to have to adjust the other celebrations that we do for kids as well. So if you can let Stephen Sullivan, the principal, know, also Bill, if it's an elementary school, and just CC me on that, then when we meet on a weekly basis at DLT, that's going to become now one of our standing agenda items is how do we now shift into celebrating the end of the school year for students and families.
Yeah. And then, so pass, fail, could you just kind of do a run over
Yep.
of that? I feel like I've been reading some of the emails and stuff, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. So, and I think other people might have questions too. So
Sure.
I know there's pass fail in the traditional sense, and then there was some wording about like how it would affect for class ranking and stuff for the older kids, and then there was talk about what it meant for the younger kids. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of an overview of that whole.
Sure. So I don't know if my principals are still on. So if I misspeak, they can correct me next week or next school committee meeting.
Sure.
From my perspective, pass fail was a way for us to determine student engagement in remote learning during the closure of the school buildings. By no means should any student who had been passing or even close to passing through the first 3 quarters or the first 2 trimesters, should the last semester, last trimester, or last quarter negatively impact them. However, with that being said, students that had made great progress in the remote learning environment or during the school closure were highly motivated, very engaged. We wanted to make sure that we had a venue to give them that opportunity to have that positively impact their work and show up. So the idea of pass fail, second to what we're hoping to do for kids, also is for DESE, our understanding, and again, this could change with guidance from DESE, but we do have to report for DESE grades for all of the days that students are in attendance. So while they have relaxed the attendance requirement, they have not yet relaxed grades. So we moved forward with pass-fail as a way to, again, provide students feedback and encouragement to continue to stay engaged, but not negatively impact anything like a class rank or GPA for the older kids. We also felt, quite frankly, that families were looking for a way to communicate to their children that this work mattered, and that they were going to be recognized through feedback and through a pass or fail for engagement in the work. With all of that being said, if we worked with families where children were really struggling and were not engaged, but the parents and the families were in contact with us through our student support team, that student could earn a pass because they are working with us, and we're recognizing through student support that there are significant reasons why a student may not be engaged in the manner and producing work like other peers. So we wanted to recognize and give some flexibility to families who were working with children who were really struggling in this new environment. So with all that being said, that's sort of where my thinking is at the superintendent level around pass-fail, with some of the details for kids at each of the grade levels or in each of the buildings.
Right. Thanks.
Okay.
Right. That was all that was on the agenda. I don't know. Right now, I will accept motions to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I will second that motion.
Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Nobody's opposed. Okay.